Hi, and welcome to Product Alliance. Today, we're interviewing a senior PM with tough technical questions similar to the ones asked at Apple, and we'll be analyzing her answer to extract a few key techniques you'll use to ace your Apple interviews and land that sought-after PM offer letter. Now pay attention to how this PM uses a structured, methodical approach to find the right North Star metric for her algorithm, that she brainstorms a dozen positive and negative input features for the algorithm, and adds her own unique twist to the algorithm to achieve the business's strategic goals. Now, I'll turn it over to our host, Adi, to start the interview. Go ahead, Adi.
Awesome. So now let's dive deeper into an algorithm design question. Say you're the product manager that owns the recommendation algorithm for Disney Plus. How would you design this algorithm to recommend videos on the new Disney Plus platform?
Okay, so the question is, how would I design the algorithms for recommending videos on Disney Plus as the product manager of this product? How I'll think about it first is going through a couple of the goals of Disney Plus, and then from there derive what I think will be part of the algorithm. Does that work as a process?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Cool. So I'll make a table of potential product or business goals and what that would mean for how our algorithm would behave. And then I'll also have a couple proxy metrics so it's easier for us to quantify that when we're thinking about the algorithms. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I have a couple handful goals that I can outline, some ways that the algorithm can behave based on those goals, and then proxy metrics. First one that I'm interested in is maximizing a user's lifetime and spending on Disney. So if we think about Disney overall, there's Disney Plus, which is the product I'm working on. There are theme parks, there are accessories, there's a lot of these merchandise that can be bought. So making sure that we maximize entire spending in Disney as a whole. And desired algorithm behavior there, something we could think about is introducing these users to new and unfamiliar franchises. So if someone is mostly engaging with Toy Story, how can you get them to also check out Star Wars and engage with that as well? And that could be measured through number of franchises they're engaging with.
While most candidates would have jumped straight into naming a North Star metric, Mika started off strong by using a structured, methodical approach to help her find the best big picture goals for this product. This gives her a chance to demonstrate her strategic thinking and also showcases her versatility. Some companies rely on the exact same metrics, such as time on site or monthly active users for all their products, but Disney isn't like that. It's a media division, and will have different priorities than its merchandise division, which will have different priorities than its theme park division, and so on. Another good example is Apple. Different parts of the company have different North Stars, and those North Stars can change as the business model evolves. For instance, the iPhone's primary goal went from maximizing its own margins to maximizing the attach rate for profitable services like Apple Music. By thinking about the goals from first principles like this, Mika shows that she can figure out the right priorities for a product given the context. The fact that Mika made a chart is great in and of itself, but her choice to use columns was also excellent. The first two columns let her exercise her strategic muscles, and the rightmost column lets her show that she understands the proxy metrics and how to use them.
This allows us to think about the breadth of the different franchises and different types of products with Disney as a whole, but you also want to think about the depth within Disney Plus. So how can we maximize a user's likelihood to use Disney Plus for another month or for another year and subscribe again and again? So that's the second goal, is thinking about maximizing the user's likelihood to use Disney Plus specifically. And how that can manifest in the algorithm is showing users these shows that they're familiar with already and similar to their current tastes. So we might know that a user is watching Frozen, and to the same heartwarming effect, they also want to be watching Moana. So we can think about showing users these similar types of shows and get them to continue engaging again and again and spend more time on our platform. Related proxy metric is going to be time spent, and that really touches on a more depth related metric within Disney Plus. Lastly, I think it's important to think about Disney Plus and growing that stickiness. So we can think about showing random or variable results. So there's always something new and something exciting, something that people are looking forward to every time they visit their Disney Plus dashboard. So you can think about DAUs and MAUs and making sure that there's that stickiness to the product. And randomization there. And on the note of randomization, this can be rolled out into the algorithm pretty easily. The fundamental conflict is between short and long-term optimization. So I know Disney is a company that focuses on the long-term and big picture, and it's a behemoth there. Its entire strategy is about movies fueling theme parks, which fuel merchandise and then fuel movies again. So a big flywheel there. I'd emphasize the long term, so maximizing a user's lifetime value to the entire Disney media empire as the main goal.
Here, Mika noticed that two goals were in tension: breadth versus depth, or long-term versus short-term. Most candidates would have been nervous about the apparent contradiction and glossed over this, but she dug in to unearth some strategic insights. She knows enough about Disney to prioritize the long-term breadth-first approach over the short-term depth-first approach, which lets her show her strategic skills and knowledge in the company's mission and values. In your interviews, try to find these tensions between the long-term and the short-term, and they'll show up in more places than you might expect. Prioritizing the long-term is usually the right move, but it depends on the company. Apple, for instance, is all about long-term brand loyalty, so think of the long-term as absolutely vital to their PMs. And finally, notice how Mika quickly and confidently cut her list of 3 goals down to just 1. This decision would have normally been a hard one, but by focusing on Disney's mission, strategy, and goals, the choice became clear. When in doubt, rely on these factors to help you prioritize, just as Mika did.
Now that we know the goals that we're prioritizing and things that we want to be focusing on, let's look at the algorithm's possible inputs and output. Okay, if I jot down a few notes.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Have a couple features or things that could be input into the ranking algorithm. And output is the list of videos that you want to watch, so the ranking algorithm for the videos. I'll talk through a couple of the inputs. One, relatively straightforward, is thinking about the demographics of the person, thinking about their age, especially for Disney Plus. Do we know if it's a parent watching or a child watching, and recommending based on that? So relatively straightforward demographics. Second is thinking about the most rated genres. So this could be most rated based on the person as they're rating through or going through a couple different videos and watching those, having a way to rate that, but also most rated genres for their user group, making sure that that input as well. Something related is what are the most popular videos that other users are also engaging with, making sure that's input. If there's anything that's an update on a specific show or a specific franchise, making sure that people see that freshness for those that are recently released, because you want to make sure that they're getting something new all the time, nothing stale. Another thing to think about is what is the engagement for other similar users? What is in their watch list? What are they not engaging with? And ascribing that to the same user base. What is the viewing history of this user? I'm also looking at, I touched on this earlier, so Disney Plus is not just Disney Plus, it's a franchise under the Disney umbrella. So we can think about their engagement in theme parks or the types of rides that they're going to, or data on their purchases and the merchandise. I think it's great that Disney has this kind of data to think about the merchandise and feed that into the videos that we're recommending. And as mentioned, has a flywheel, right? If we get them to engage in these types of videos, then they'll also go to Disney parks again and buy the similar type of merchandise or ride similar kinds of rides. So I think that's a really interesting and big factor for Disney. And then also thinking about a couple negative signals, right? So if people are starting to watch a specific movie or show and you quit halfway, that's a negative signal. So put that in the algorithm as well. And also a couple categories that you may have, or users clicked on, but didn't end up watching or engaging with. That could also be a negative signal. So input that into the algorithm as well.
This right here is where Mika started showing signs deserving a strong higher rating. She came up with a dozen ideas for inputs to her ranking algorithm, whereas the average candidate would have maxed out at 5, maybe 6. She also clearly explained where each input did and why it was useful for her algorithm. The key technique Mika used here was to share all of her ideas proactively. In most interviews, the candidate gives some ideas and the interview pushes them for more. The candidate thinks of a couple more and the interview pushes them again, and so on. Mika doesn't wait for the interview to push her. She just keeps coming up with ideas without prompting. This shows her independence, confidence, and it really helps her build up momentum and shows that she's driving the interview. But how did Mika come up with so many ideas in the first place? We'll see that she thought through several right off the bat, but once those were exhausted, she brought in fresh insights and used those to mine for new ideas. For instance, she discovered negative signals, something that tells you that the user didn't like the show, and that helped her craft a couple new ideas. She then realized that the additional data sources like theme park engagement were available, and that helped her get more ideas too. Business to consumer or B2C companies like Apple place a high premium on creativity and lateral thinking, since that's how PMs come up with the next billion-dollar product line. And Mika shows that she has these skills in abundance.
So talk about a couple different algorithms. Now I want to think a little bit more about the execution of it. So if I were to actually build out this algorithm with lots of different features, I'd start with the common machine learning technique of collaborative filtering. So compares my watch history with the history of other users, right? And I think this is nice because then it has that human factor into it. Instead of a person manually like feeding you these types of videos, it technically feeds in the videos of other types of humans and other users, and there's that personalization. This lets us roll together a lot of data sources in what I described to you. So watch histories of other users, their sentiment data, what they're upvoting, what they're putting in their watch list, what they're browsing through in the categories. So how I understand it, collaborative filtering generates scores for each show, and then you can choose the top rated shows for your list of recommendations.
Mika did well to mention collaborative filtering, which is the base recommendation algorithm used by Netflix, Hulu, and other streaming platforms. But instead of just name dropping it, she took the time to explain what it is and why it's useful. This let her bring in elements of a technical explainer interview into the algorithm design question, letting her showcase even more skills. Generally speaking, it's easy to slip explanations of technical concepts into any of the PM interviews, but of course, don't try to explain obvious things like machine learning. But if you can clearly describe what a buzzword is like collaborative filtering actually means, you're going to look good. And this is especially important to companies like Apple, where PMs are seen as the translation layer between engineering and other parts of the company, like design and business development.
And to accomplish that randomization factor that I mentioned, we could fuzz the list a little bit and add a little bit of a small random number to each score so that there's always something different or variable whenever you visit Disney+. However, I would modify the algorithm a bit to prefer shows that are a little bit more distant. So an example is if you watch 3 out of the 4 Toy Story movies, a normal collaborative filtering algorithm would suggest the 4th Toy Story movie, right? And pretty simple there. But this recommendation wouldn't serve the goal of maximizing the Disney customer's lifetime value. So Getting someone to marginally deepen their attachment to Toy Story has far lower returns because we know that they're going to be watching that fourth movie anyway, than getting them to fall in love with another type of show, let's say Wreck-It Ralph. So we want our algorithm to prefer shows that are somewhat close, but not too close, hence recommending Wreck-It Ralph over the fourth Toy Story movie. So it's powerful to push users to fall in love with something as well that has a theater release. So very strategic there, because then it helps maximize revenue for that specific show or movie. Now, strategically, thinking about other things that are off-the-shelf collaborative filtering algorithm might not do, and thinking more about what makes Disney Plus different and unique from Netflix and Amazon Prime Video and everything else. So one way that Disney Plus targets the family, or one way that Disney Plus is strong at, is that it will target the family much more than the rest, right? So a standard algorithm might not recognize that the best recommendation will differ if it's a parent watching, in which case maybe it's a bit more like Star Wars related or more action films. Or if their younger kids are watching, in this case it might be Frozen, or as mentioned, Wreck-It Ralph or Toy Story. And so perhaps our algorithm is showing different buckets of recommendations and different genres there to cater to who we think is watching instead of a single list. So these buckets could be shows for parents, shows for kids, and then a more general bucket, shows for everyone. So thinking about that as part of the layer that Disney Plus can provide for the users within their group.
This is where Mika locked in her strong higher rating. Most candidates would just use standard collaborative filtering, but here Mika described 3 separate modifications to her algorithm. This shows that she understands collaborative filtering so well that she's comfortable changing it and building upon it. Her modifications themselves also demonstrated more of her skills. Mika's first change was to add a fuzzing factor, which slightly randomizes the ranking and shows that viewers are seeing something different every time they open the app. Here, she showed that she was able to remember the original business goal of increasing stickiness and able to build that into the algorithm. In other words, she connected the business needs into the technology, which is exactly what a PM at places like Apple are supposed to do. In general, remember that the algorithm design questions aren't just testing your technical chops, they're also testing whether you can integrate business needs. Her second modification was even stronger. Mika realized that collaborative filtering naturally pushes viewers deeper into the content that they're already familiar with, and she proposed a change to make it focus on more breadth than depth. She did a great job illustrating this abstract point with Toy Story and Wreck-It Ralph analogies, and she used also this to tie back into the business goals, namely increasing viewers' lifetime value for Disney. Most importantly, she showed that she understood collaborative filtering well enough to point out its shortcomings. She even found ways to improve it. In your interviews, try critiquing the technology if you feel comfortable enough with it. It's a great way to show depth of your knowledge.
To end, so companies like Netflix need to use collaborative filtering because they aren't experts on content and only recently started making shows their own. Previously is licensing content from third-party media companies. For Disney Plus, on the other hand, there's histories of understanding our own content. And this isn't just with videos, but with all of the brand that we have and strongholds there. So we have a plethora of these insights and customers that we should use and tweak and input into our models and really better understand what the best experience is for our fans. And that'll help with higher engagement rates for all of our Disney Plus videos and Disney merchandise as a whole versus just the blanket collaborative filtering like our other competitors are doing.
Makes sense. And would you ever, for what factors, maybe out of the ones that you listed, would you go back and override the collaborative filtering machine learning model because you're using some of those insights that you've gathered from that consumer behavior and that history of knowledge that you have? Are there any 1 or 2 metrics that stand out that you might choose to override the ML model for?
Yeah, I think something that was interesting and rather unique that incumbents like Netflix and other companies might not have is this engagement with other merchandise or franchises already really strong with the Disney brand. So I mentioned like theme parks. We have a lot of data around our users for that. Things that they're buying off the shelf. I think that's really unique and again engages in this whole flywheel of, hey, if we recommend the right type of merchandise for you, then you'll engage more with these types of videos, and if you engage more with these types of videos, then we know what other merchandise to share with you. So I think that's really unique with Disney in particular, that no other company can do.
Mika hit on a key concept that the interviewer was probably looking for, the broader ecosystem. She realized that for Disney, video feeds the broader company strategy. Video drives merchandise sales and theme park visits, which in turn make people want to watch more videos, which powers even more merchandise and park demand, and so on. She unearthed this positive feedback loop, which is called the flywheel, and showed how Disney Plus fits into the bigger picture. Many other tech companies have ecosystems, especially Apple. Every Apple product supports other Apple products. For instance, Mac drives demand for iPhones, iPhones drive demand for AirPods and Apple Music, and so on. When you're trying to improve a product in an ecosystem, you can't just improve it in isolation. You have to think about how it makes the other products in the company's ecosystem better and drives demand for those as well. Mika did a great job explaining in the context of Disney, and yet again showcased her business skills and her technical skills in an interview.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight, and thanks for walking me through this question. Do you have any, if you had to go back, was there anything else that you would have added or anything else you would have changed in your structure of your reply?
I think that the different features added into a ranking algorithm could have been streamlined. So felt like I was babbling on with like the popular shows and the genres and the history of a user, but there definitely is a way to organize that a bit better, right? There's like demographic, there's something that only Disney can provide, like the engagement with theme parks, etc. There's things that you're upvoting, and then there's the negative factors that I also include. So structuring that a little bit more, and then I feel like I also could have spent a little more time in the goals. I think upfront spending time on the goals is helpful because then it trickles out to the rest of how I'm thinking about the algorithm and the problem. So spending a little bit more time around the proxy metrics and making sure that those are vetted for and that there aren't other things that I can input there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think by just defining those goals and proxy metrics, it was helpful to set the structure for the discussion later. And yeah, just want to say thank you for walking me through how you would design the algorithm. Great response. So Mika did a really good job here at just breaking down how she would go about designing the algorithm for Disney Plus. She started out with goals, what this would mean for the algorithm, and then proxy metrics that we would measure to make sure that the algorithm was working correctly. Later, she listed a lot of different features, both positive and negative. One thing to note here is that a lot of candidates will only list positive factors, things that the model can take in that might help improve it, things like past purchase orders, what other people are watching, popular shows. But the negative factors, which she called out, like quitting a show early after only watching it for 10 minutes, or going to a category that's listed on Disney Plus, but then after browsing, leaving it. These negative factors are what actually help make the model so much more powerful, because when you realize what people and users don't like watching, you can then refine it and never show that content again to make sure that you create these loops that start taking that feedback, refining the algorithm, and only showing them the content that they're likely to go deeper with. And so these are all great things that she did. And at the very end, one thing that would have made this answer a little more powerful is if Mika had talked about a stage rollout for her algorithm. I prodded, and she definitely got there. But generally, when you think about designing algorithms, in the beginning, you don't have a lot of user data. And so based on what insights you do have, you can launch a V1 of your model, and then based on these other factors that you have listed for your model, you can slowly start adding them in as your model, to make your model better and better over time as you start collecting more data. And so in the beginning, she suggested that you can use some of these baseline factors. You can start adding collaborative filtering on it, so you can make sure as you're collecting data on what people are watching, that model gets refined and better over time. And then in unique areas where you can leverage Disney's understanding of their customer base, and when they have a business reason to do so, like a launch of a new franchise or a new movie, they can start showing you some of those characters, those movies, those plots, and those franchisees in your feed to help push those larger level goals.
Thanks, Adi, for leading such an eye-opening interview. Mika, the senior PM you just saw, skillfully blended elements of brainstorming, business strategy metrics, and design thinking into an algorithm design question, and she showcased her deep knowledge of technical concepts like collaborative filtering. Her answer was made even more compelling by the way that she used the whiteboard to prioritize goals, sketch out her algorithm, and walk through proposed modifications. If you want to learn the techniques and insights that Mika pieced together, you'll find them in Product Alliance's flagship Apple PM interview course, where our instructors will teach you exclusive step-by-step tactics for acing over a dozen types of interview questions that Apple likes to ask. You'll also get over 40 examples of answers just like this one, including the whiteboard graphics and expert commentary you just saw, to show how to put the theory into practice. We'll also tear down Apple's 10-year strategy and teach you some key insights from which we've compiled by talking to product leads across the company. You'll learn how Apple Silicon is the culmination of Apple's vertical integration play, and how Apple's core products like the iPhone, iPad, and Mac are reinventing themselves. What Apple's fashion strategy tells us about the future of wearables, and how the iPhone is becoming the launchpad for unlimited high-margin service revenue. Apple's speculative bets in areas like mixed reality, and more. And we'll throw in our list of PM interview questions that our team and customers have gotten from Apple in the last month, word for word. The flagship Apple course is the culmination of hundreds of hours of research and conversations with product directors, hiring managers, and PM recruiters across Apple. We're confident that the insights and skills you'll gain from this course will put you a step ahead of the pack and put you in a strong position to land your dream job at Apple. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Remember that this lesson was just the tip of the iceberg, so click below to check out the full flagship Apple PM interview course.